Liesl Tommy, director of Respect. This is your feature film directorial debut. Did you ever imagine your first film would be about Aretha Franklin?
I most certainly did not. I fully expected my first film to be a small indie movie that I wrote and directed. I would, just squirreling around New York City, trying to get on and off of subways with a crew. I never imagined that it would be a studio film.
That could be your next film then. So there you go. This this is your starter film.
Right.
Well, this biopic has been in development for years, and forgive me if the timeline is incorrect, but I think Jennifer Hudson was cast first because Aretha picked her, and then you came on board, and then you brought on Tracy Scott Wilson to write the script. Is that correct?
That's right. I was actually directing a television episode in Atlanta and I got a phone call from the studio, which I was prepared for in November of 2018, I think it was. And I just, it was supposed to be a casual chat, and I was very aware because I directed primarily theater for 15 years and then about a year and maybe 2 years of television, that I was a long shot. But I knew that I could do it. And so I had a very clear vision for the film and I pitched it. I sort of turned it into a casual chat, into a full on, just this is the movie. These are the songs. I said it should start in the church and end in the church. I said it should not be a cradle to grave film. It should be a film that dealt with, these 20 years of her life that I felt was, just a really beautiful, emotional, exciting journey, and that it should be really about the creative process and finding your voice as an artist. I even had like a tagline. I was full on. And they were meeting with writers primarily, and then they came back to me and they said that they really liked the pitch and they wanted to go with that, and that they'd let me build the film around that idea.
I did notice that it started in the church with her, that's how she grew up with her dad, this, famous preacher, and it ended with her recording Amazing Grace, her most successful album. And can you just talk about like why those like endpoints, like, or bookends, I guess, like the church is so important to her. Like, why do you think that was so important to kind of focus on those 20 years with that starting point and end point?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of looked at it as a superhero origin story, honestly, because we know all about her as the giant star, but people don't really know about who she was beyond that, and what her roots were. She comes from a fascinating family. She's she came from American royalty in terms, in the Black community. Her father was a famous preacher. And what I wanted to show in the child, because normally in a biopic you get like 8 minutes of the kid and then you go right away to, and I knew I was going to spend a little bit more time, much to the concern of everybody, but I knew that it was important to spend time in her childhood in that house with her father. First of all, you never see wealthy African American period depictions, right? And they had a very glamorous, fabulous life in Detroit because her father was so successful. And they had all these amazing dignitaries coming through their home. Her father was Martin Luther King's mentor. All of these incredible musicians and writers. It was a like really inspiring childhood that she had, which of course adds to the pressure that she was under to be successful, because she was surrounded by these dynamic, minds. So that was important. And also the church, the formation of her political identity as well as her artistic identity came from the Black church. The activism, the civil rights movement, and then as well as just the pure music and the community that the church provided. And those were things that, it shaped her music and it shaped her politics. And those two things never, ever left her from, she was an activist until the day she died, the same way she was a musician until the day she died.
Mm-hmm. I talked to Clint Ramos, the costume designer, recently, and he said his favorite part was actually creating Aretha's interior world, and he worked with you a lot on just finding like the right palette and the colors, and like he used like red as a link to like her mother who died when she was young, and also like the color of shame. So can you talk about coming up with the visual style for her private life that the world didn't see?
Yeah, so the thing that was really exciting to me about just coming up with the visual vision for the film, because we traversed through 3 decades, childhood in Detroit in the 50s, which was a very formal life as the children of a famous preacher. And you have to be very aware of appearances. It's a lot of pressure to be the child or the wife of a preacher. And then moving into the 60s, where she slowly starts to find herself in New York City. Her sort of sexual identity also is present. And then into the 70s, where she kind of hits rock bottom and then has to build herself back up again. So I wanted that combination of the extreme glamour of a person who performs, and a person who loves fashion. I wanted this to be a fashion movie, but I also wanted to show, in those moments when she is really struggling with her demons, the opposite, that we can live in the gritty truth and the elevated glamour. And because, this is another thing. We see so many depictions of strong, fabulous, Black women who are constantly reading and showing people, what the truth is. But what about when Black women are feeling vulnerable? What about when Black women are feeling shy? What about when Black women are feeling unsure of themselves? Are we allowed to live, in those places as well? Are we allowed to be full human beings, or are we only here for your entertainment? And I think it was really important, to use this film and Aretha Franklin's story, because this is what she did in her music, to show the full journey, a full emotional journey of what it is to be a Black woman. And the clothes, for me, it was so important to tell the journey of how put together women were in church, how I said, because in this country, Black people, especially during the civil rights movement, that was really respectability politics, where people had to be perfectly put together to show white people that we were human and that we had value, right? And so there's constantly, for me, that contrast of impeccable and barely hanging on.
Mm-hmm. Well, you also show her, the domestic abuse she suffered at the hands of her first husband, Ted. And I just would like for you to talk about like shooting those scenes, because it's not gratuitous and you do it very with like sensitivity and just kind of matter of factly, like this is what she experienced. So can you talk about your approach to those scenes?
Yes, absolutely. I spent a lot of time talking to Kramer Morgenthau, the cinematographer, about how I wanted to shoot those, because there's a couple of things. I did not want, to abuse Aretha Franklin in my film. And I didn't want to abuse the audience. I feel that we are so traumatized by images of violence on Black bodies that we have to be really responsible about, how we are shooting these images. And I also feel like sometimes in these kinds of films, you actually degrade your character by degrading them on screen if you're not being thoughtful. So this was something I struggled with a lot. And so in the end, I made a decision that you're never going to see him actually make his fist or his hand make contact with her face. So I did a lot of cutting away. I was more concerned with the emotional consequences of the violence than actually showing the violence, because that's another thing I often feel in films, is that it's just all so casual and there's no cost. And so people out there who are genuinely experiencing violence at the hand of of spouses, or out in the world, if they're assaulted, they're made to feel like there's something wrong with them for actually not being able to just bounce back. And we know that that's certainly not the case. And so, having a light, delicate, thoughtful touch as a filmmaker when it comes to violence against women in this film was really, really important to me. And there's a way to do it, artfully, and that I got as many gasps from the cutaway as I did from as you would from actually seeing the punch, I think.
Well, you also have a cameo in this film in the hotel scene. So what was it like casting yourself and playing that fan?
I mean, it was horrible. It was so stressful.
How did you direct yourself?
It was very stressful. I mean, I almost like changed my mind every single second until, and it was a really, heavy day. A lot had to happen in that day. But the truth is, I started off as an actor. And I've just seen some of my favorite directors do that. Spike, Quentin. And so I just felt like, I can do it. And also I never met Aretha Franklin. I was brought on to this film after she passed. And I just kind of thought this is my way of saying to her everything I would have said in real life. That, those lines, that's, the scene with the fan was something that I felt was really important to include in the film. Where someone just tells her, a woman tells her what her music means to her. And so, that was partially what it was, is my chance to say what I never got to say in real life.